My dad suspended me until I apologized to my sister. I simply said, "All right," and walked away. The next morning, she showed up smirking, ready to watch me be humiliated. Instead, she found my desk empty and my resignation letter waiting. Then the company lawyer rushed in pale, asking, "Tell me you didn't post it." The first time I ever watched my sister get walked out of a building by security, her heels never touched the elevator button. 2 guards had her by each elbow before she'd taken 3 steps, and the man with the clipboard kept apologizing to her the entire way, like he was the one who should feel ashamed. 6 hours earlier, Madison had walked into that same building expecting to watch me get erased. None of that would matter yet. To understand how a logistics company my father built with 3 trucks and a rented office in Ohio ended with federal auditors in the boardroom and security guards escorting his favorite child past. The vending machines. You have to go back 3 weeks to the first invoice that didn't add up. I'd been running day-to-day operations at Hayes Freight Solutions for 6 years by then. Ever since I turned down a supply chain job in Chicago that paid better because Dad asked me to come home just for a year while he restructured the dispatch side, the year became 6. I kept payroll running through 3 separate emergencies, settled 2 vendor lawsuits without a courtroom, and pushed through a software conversion that half the warehouse still complained about. But that had in the 2 years since saved us $400,000 in routing errors alone. My office had a chipped Cleveland Browns mug I never washed properly. A second monitor Madison called excessive, and a framed photo of me and Dad standing in front of the first truck he ever bought back when the whole company fit in a rented lot with a Rottweiler chained by the gate that used to bark at every delivery van that pulled in. Madison was 26, 3 years into the company, and freshly promoted to Director of Client Relations, a title Dad had created for her the way you'd build a room onto a house because your kid asked for one. She was good at the parts of the job that showed. Clients loved her. She remembered birthdays, sent handwritten notes, closed 2 of our biggest contracts on nothing but charm and good timing. She was also, I would learn, the kind of person who understood exactly which version of herself a room needed and became that version so smoothly you didn't notice the performance until you were already the one who looked unreasonable. The first red flag was small enough that I almost let it go. It was a Sunday night in early October, and I was reconciling the vendor payment queue before Monday's board packet went out. A habit, not a requirement, but the kind of thing you do when you've watched what happens to a company that doesn't check its own math. A line item caught my eye. Northline Support Services, $11,200, coded as Client Relations Consulting. I didn't recognize the name, and I'd built the vendor database myself 2 years earlier. I told myself it was probably a subcontractor Madison had brought on for one of her client dinners. Something small, something I'd simply never had reason to see before. I made a note in my phone and went to bed without checking further, the way you step over a crack in the sidewalk because stopping to look feels like overreacting. Monday morning I asked her about it over coffee casually, the way you ask your sister anything. "Relax," she said, waving a hand without looking up from her phone. "It's for the Martel account. Client gift, some consulting on the relationship side. I'll send you the receipts." The receipts never came. I told myself she'd forgotten. Everyone forgets things. The second red flag arrived 9 days later, and it hit differently. A cold, specific kind of wrong instead of a vague one. I was pulling a shipment delay report for a board update and noticed a payment approval rooted under my own digital signature, dated the previous Thursday at 11:47 p.m. I had been asleep at 11:47 p.m. On Thursday, I remember the exact moment my stomach dropped because I actually said no out loud alone in my office like the word could undo what was on the screen. I pulled the access logs. The redundant ones I'd insisted on building into the new platform 2 years earlier over Dad's objections about cost and Madison's complaints that it made everyone's activity too visible. The login had come from her laptop. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Delegated access, a shared login, something boring. I brought it to Daniel Price, our CFO, informally over lunch. The way you float a concern before you're ready to call it an accusation. Daniel had been with the company 18 years, loyal almost to a fault. The kind of man who wore the same navy blazer to every board meeting because he trusted consistency more than style. He said he'd look into it. 2 days later, he told me he'd gotten pulled into a vendor dispute in Toledo and hadn't had time. I believed him. I still believe him, honestly. Nobody in that building had time for anything except putting out whatever fire was closest. By the 3rd week, I stopped rationalizing and started documenting. I printed the discrepancy report, the vendor mismatch, the signature timestamp, and 3 more invoices with dates that had been quietly changed after the fact. On Friday afternoon, I took everything to my father. We were alone in his office with the door closed, just like when I was a teenager and something needed fixing before Mom got home. He read 2 pages, then slowly set them down as if they had suddenly become too heavy. "You're telling me Madison changed invoice dates?" he asked. "I'm telling you what the system logged," I replied. "I'm not telling you why. She's 26 years old and just got promoted. You want me to accuse her of fraud over a formatting mistake? It's not a formatting mistake, Dad. The vendor doesn't even exist anymore." He looked at me for a long moment, and I watched him do what he always did whenever the truth threatened something he wanted to protect. He didn't argue with the facts, he questioned my attitude. "You've always been too hard on her," he said. "Ease up. Family isn't a compliance audit." I walked out of his office with the same report still in my hand, unread by the one person who could have done something about it. That Friday night, during the warehouse crew's informal payday happy hour, Madison casually joked in front of 6 coworkers that I still color-coded spreadsheets for fun and that some people just didn't know how to relax. Everyone laughed. I laughed too, because that's what you do. But later, standing near the loading dock while a dog barked somewhere down the street, I realized something I never thought I'd feel toward my own sister. I didn't feel angry. I felt unsafe. The next warning came during a client dinner I hadn't even planned to attend. Daniel asked me to fill in at the last minute when Martell Foods regional buyer, Walter Griggs, visited Cleveland for a contract review. Madison handled the evening perfectly. She refilled water glasses before anyone noticed, remembered Walter's daughter had started college that fall, and laughed naturally at all the right moments. Halfway through dinner, Walter casually thanked her for the extra attention she'd given last quarter's delayed shipment report. He mentioned how her follow-up email explained the delays as weather-related. There hadn't been any bad weather that week. I remembered because I was the one adjusting driver schedules during that completely ordinary Tuesday. I convinced myself I was mistaken. Maybe she meant another week. Maybe I was just looking for a pattern because I already suspected one. Suspicion has a way of making everything look like evidence. I said nothing at the table. I smiled, ordered another coffee, and watched my sister charm a client with a story that wasn't true. The next morning, I checked the routing logs. Clear skies, all 3 trucks the entire week. The weather note had been added to the report 40 minutes after Madison sent her email to Walter. It hadn't explained anything. It had covered something. Even then, I didn't take it to my father. I kept telling myself I needed stronger proof before giving him another excuse to say I was unfair to her. The 4th warning came from outside the company, and it finally made denial impossible. A vendor relations representative from one of our smaller logistics partners called my direct line. Confused about why a consulting reimbursement to someone named Claire Whitman had been charged to a shipment his company had never handled. I didn't recognize the name. I told him I'd investigate and call him back. Then I sat perfectly still before opening the activity log that only our IT manager and I normally reviewed. 3 invoices. All edited after submission, all processed through Madison's credentials, all linked to a vendor account registered to Claire Whitman. At 2 a.m, I drafted an email to outside compliance counsel. I deleted it, then I wrote it again, then deleted it a second time. I told myself I was protecting my father from a decision he wasn't ready to make. The truth was, I still hoped there was some explanation that proved my sister hadn't done what the data clearly showed. I confronted her the next evening in the parking garage. My engine was still running, her heels echoed across the concrete as she walked toward her car. "I know about Northline," I said. "I know about Claire Whitman." For a brief second, surprise crossed her face, then it disappeared. "You've been going through my accounts. I've been doing my job. Your job is operations, Ethan not spying on me. Then explain the signature." She stepped closer. And for a moment, I thought she might finally tell the truth. Instead, her expression softened into the same practiced look she used with nervous clients. "You've always hated that Dad trusts me with people. You think spreadsheets make you special." If you tell him, I'll make sure he understands exactly what kind of brother searches through his sister's work just to destroy her. That's not a denial. Watch yourself, she said before walking away. I barely slept that night. Her warning echoed in my head. The same voice that once read me bedtime stories now sounded like a threat. The board meeting where everything finally came apart wasn't even supposed to be about any of this. It was just a routine quarterly review with printed agendas and bad coffee. I brought the discrepancy report anyway. I decided I'd rather be the reason the room became uncomfortable than the reason nothing ever changed. I'm not apologizing for catching her altering invoice dates, I said after Dad turned the meeting into a discussion about my attitude instead of her actions. Across the glass table, Madison leaned back with her arms crossed and a faint smile on her face. You always think everyone needs your approval. Our CFO, Daniel, stared down at his notebook. Rebecca Cole, our general counsel, sat completely still. My father stood at the head of the table. Robert Hayes had never needed to raise his voice to control a room. He used the company's history like a weapon whenever someone challenged it. You will go home, he said. You will think about your attitude, and when you come back, you'll apologize to your sister in front of the entire leadership team. Silence filled the room. I looked at Madison. She looked pleased. I looked at my father. He looked absolutely certain. The certainty of a man who had never truly experienced being wrong. I nodded once. All right, I said, nothing else. I walked back to my office, packed nothing except my laptop bag, and left. No one stopped me. By then, everyone in the company treated Hayes' family arguments like severe weather. Stay out of the way and wait for it to pass. I didn't go home to think about my attitude. I drove straight to my lawyer. At exactly 7:12 the next morning, Madison arrived early with a coffee someone else had clearly picked up for her. She walked toward my office already smiling. The smile disappeared almost instantly. My desk was empty, the framed photo was gone, the binders were gone, the second monitor she always teased me about was gone. The only thing left was a single sheet of paper placed perfectly in the center of the desk. My resignation letter, printed on company letterhead because I wanted the irony to be impossible to miss. My father walked in behind her, still looking at his phone. What is it? He asked. Madison didn't answer. She just kept staring at the empty office. Rebecca Cole rushed off the elevator, breathing hard, gripping her phone so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Robert, she said, tell me you didn't post it. My father frowned. Post what? Rebecca looked through the conference room's glass wall. I was already seated inside with Daniel Price, 2 independent board members, and the forensic auditor the board chair had agreed to bring in the night before. My father's smile vanished. For the first time in his life, he didn't walk into his own building like he owned the air inside it. He entered slowly, studying every face, reading the room like a battlefield he had already lost. Daniel sat at the far end with a folder in front of him. Rebecca remained near the door, one hand pressed against her forehead. Madison followed my father inside, her confidence fading with every step as her eyes shifted between the empty chair beside him and me. I never shouted. Before anyone could speak, I said, my resignation is effective immediately. I'm also stepping down as head of operations, authorized signer, and system administrator. My father accused me of sabotaging the company. But I reminded him that my employment contract allowed me to resign if my duties were restricted and required me to report compliance risks. Daniel then revealed the evidence I'd sent to the board: altered invoices, fake approvals under my name, edited reports, and system logs proving who made the changes. Rebecca confirmed I hadn't leaked anything publicly. I had only notified the board, the bank, and key clients as required. The room changed when Daniel exposed 3 payments totaling $186,400 to Northline Support Services, a company dissolved years earlier. The evidence pointed directly to Madison. Soon after, the bank requested an urgent meeting, auditors arrived, and the board launched a formal investigation. The audit uncovered fake vendors, deleted emails, and messages showing Madison tried to frame me before anyone discovered the fraud. My father finally realized I'd been telling the truth all along. The board placed Madison on administrative leave, revoked her access, and removed my father's financial authority until the investigation ended. When Madison slapped me during the meeting, I stayed calm and simply said, "The cameras will handle it." Later, my father asked me to stay and help save the company. I told him I had already completed a full transition and was leaving. He apologized, but I still walked away. Weeks later, Madison was charged with wire fraud and falsifying business records. My father lost his CEO position and Hayes Freight was eventually sold. I accepted a leadership role at Martell Foods, where I built systems that made honesty easy and fraud difficult. A year later, I caught another billing issue at my new job because I had learned one lesson: it's never nothing until you check. My father still called from time to time, but I finally understood that I never needed to apologize for telling the truth.